What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again. Hope you all are doing all right. And this time we return with Marc of the Arson Choir. Great to talk to you again since NAMM.
Hello, how's it going? I'm back, ready to bug you, and hopefully this sounds good over the phone.
Yeah, as good as it will get. As good as it will get. I record with 40 different audio devices, so one of them has to be tolerable.
Awesome.
Yeah, but it's so awesome to have you here. You have this brand new EP coming out, Invisible Monsters, on October 2nd. Was there, do you want to talk about, how the making of this EP was? Was there kind of, a preconceived idea? How did Invisible Monsters sort of, come to be?
So, the thing with coming up with the songs for this band is very much, I sit in my room, I come up with, 70 riffs, and I take those riffs to the guys, and we kind of filter out, what works, what doesn't work, what they like, what they don't like, and basically I just keep going back and forth with that until I get my way. There wasn't much of a concept. I kind of got in my songwriting mode, which is usually either when something traumatic or important happens in my life, or I'm watching a movie, or I'm reading a comic book, or I'm reading something that triggers riffs in my brain that go, hey, this might sound like a cool song idea, and I take that to Phil, who's our vocalist, and he kind of gets a feeling and molds it to what he's feeling at the moment, and that's really it. The concept wasn't, we didn't really have a whole concept coming with the record. It just kind of developed on its own.
That's awesome. So it was a very organic process, pretty much.
Yeah, we try to keep it as natural sounding as possible. The one thing that we do as a band that I feel like not a lot of bands are doing is we actually still get in the room and bang it out as a band. There's a lot of bands, and nothing against bands that do that, but there's a lot of bands that have one writer who writes everything in a computer and brings that to the band, and that's totally cool. That's how technology is going right now. But we really like to just have that feel of bouncing ideas off each other as soon as they can come together. Definitely.
Being that, could the first two singles that you released off of this EP, could that almost serve as a clear representation? Could Revenge My Love and almost serve as a sort of good representation of what this whole EP is about?
The Revenge My Love came out as Revenge My Love was a very difficult subject to tackle at first, because when Phil wrote it, he actually wrote the song maybe about it would have been released back then, so it would have been almost 10 to 12 months ago.
Oh, wow.
And it was a subject that it keeps coming up, it's really hard to talk about because it's so close to what's been going on with George Floyd, and then Breonna Taylor, and then just everything else that was going on. And he had wrote that as a black, individual who experiences these kind of issues with police and things regularly, and then to have everything happen, it really hit home. It really hit, and it really felt like we got to get this song out. This seems like the most appropriate time to get this song out. The band collectively felt that way. But as far as it being a representation of the entire EP, no. I think there's a lot of ideas in the other songs that are a little bit more universal. Vanisher can be interpreted different ways, but for me, Vanisher was about losing somebody very close to you right when you needed them, right when you feel like it's the time that you need that person, and for whatever reason they're not able to be around you anymore. There's two more songs that are still coming out that I think their ideas on their own can mean something else to whoever listens to it, and I hope that translates well. But yeah, Revenge My Love was very specific, and I feel like that was necessary.
Mm-hmm. The last time we spoke at NAMM, I asked you if Trophy Nation almost served as like a clear representation of the direction that Arson Choir is going into, but with this new EP coming out, could this maybe serve as like more of a defined representation of the direction Arson Choir is going for maybe the full-length album?
Dude, I hope not. In a weird way, like, I try to make sure that whatever I write, if I come up with 17 ideas, each one sounds like its own individual idea, because I'm very eclectic in my music. Like, I like to have, I go from something like stupid heavy, like Dillinger Escape Plan, to something disgustingly heavy, like End or the Black Dahlia Murder. And each of those things influence my guitar playing, so I'd like to make sure that I'm not always writing the same thing. I like to try to inject, something new and interesting in each song, while keeping the same overall sound. I feel like there's a lot of bands that kind of crank out the same thing over and over, and that's cool. Like, if that's, a lot of people expect consistency. In Arson, I do my best to vary it up as much as possible.
I understand that. I think one thing I loved, especially when I first heard Trophy Nation, and I mentioned this before, going from a song like Just a Tip to White Girls, I mean, like having so many different vibes behind it, like it almost seems like you don't have to worry about an Arson Choir song sounding too much like an Arson Choir song.
Right. The stuff from Trophy Nation, we still do play it, and it's still a big part of this band. Unfortunately, with that particular vocalist, we didn't get the chance to really push those songs out the way we really wanted to. Luckily, with Phil, he's been able to take the reins and really mold those songs into something that means something to him in a different way. So it's not just like, he's not just singing somebody else's lyrics, it really does mean something to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then moving from Trophy Nation to Invisible Monsters, I do think there's a consistent sound, but I don't think it's a repetition. I really do think it's a growth. I really do hope that people can see that, yeah, it's the Arson Choir, but this is a completely different animal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. If you do the same thing every time, people are going to say you're repetitive. If you experiment too much, they're going to say you're all over the place. So I think you guys really have your own distinct style that has plenty of, I think, like, especially after listening to these first two singles, it almost seems like with everything you make, more doors open up for the future while still having the same roots.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. I know you listen to a lot of records all the time, so I really appreciate you saying that.
Being a post-hardcore fan, I mean, when I first got introduced to you guys, I immediately thought of like Glassjaw and Every Time I Die and a lot of the classics. I almost thought that you guys were from the East Coast.
You know what's funny? We get that a lot. We get a lot of people that especially from the East Coast, that are like, "Why aren't you guys out here? You would do so much better, so much faster out there." We just got we're the LA version of a New York sound.
That should be your slogan. You gotta trademark that.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna write that down right now.
Yeah, and with all the like rock bands that we have on the East Coast, we're making an East Coast version of like the Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses over here.
I'm definitely seeing that. I'm definitely seeing that there's a resurgence in the like 80s hair metal style coming back, and I kind of into it.
I mean, to each his own. I mean, what I find unique about like your arrangement and your style is it almost, because you mentioned that it's so organic in the way that you arrange everything, you sometimes aren't very dictated by a preconceived idea, right? It's not like you go into the studio or go into songwriting mode saying it has to be this way. Everything kind of falls into place, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, the short answer is yes. The long answer is sometimes we just go in and throw out riffs, and I can go into the studio and throw out 20 riffs, and none of them might work. You just got to be prepared for that. Especially with being, like you said, a post-hardcore, mathcore style band, sometimes there is a too weird. Like, there can be too weird, and it happens. It's something that you have to accept. You got to put your ego aside and go, okay, you know what? Maybe I just gotta hold on the weirdness. Maybe I'll bring back that riff in another day, and somebody else will hear it and go, oh, I finally get what you're going for.
Yeah. Aren't you always worried that the song you'll leave out too will just be a B-side one day, just be the biggest hit you guys ever had?
Yeah, we've noticed that with the, like, I don't know how far I can get into it, but with lockdown, with quarantine, with not being able to play shows, we've kind of went ahead and started working on the next record, and I've went ahead and revisited some of those songs from the Trophy Nation B-sides, where it's like, were we onto something? Was there something there? And we're gonna revisit them and see if maybe for the next thing, maybe with the new vocalist, maybe he hears something that we didn't hear before, or maybe he hears something that piques his ear a little better than we did the first time.
Yeah, it almost seems like, because, art is life. It grows, it develops, it sometimes dies, unfortunately. Like, that's the beauty of art. And sometimes you have something that you may not resonate with right away, but then a pinnacle moment or some sort of epiphany can happen where all of a sudden that was the perfect riff to describe what was later to come.
Well, I like that you use the term art, because art is very, it's subjective. It depends on the time. It depends on how you hear it. It also depends on the art. Like, you may see art in music or painting, or I see a lot of art in film, and to be honest, stand-up comedy, comic books. Like, art can hit you in a different way, depending on its medium, and art can hit a person, an individual, a different way.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, like, people sometimes say that art isn't subjective. That's bullshit. Art resonates with people. Even if it's not something that you particularly relate to, it captures a reaction, and it is an experience that has some sort of impact on you, whether you realize it or not.
Exactly. The best kind of art, for me, the best kind of art is dangerous, because I feel like a lot of what's considered art isn't dangerous anymore, and if you're not really pushing the limits of people's tastes, you don't really get to see what is really out there, what gets a real, like, visceral reaction out of a person. I'm trying to think of a good example, but something that came to mind right now was, like, I went back and revisited this video game called Dead Space.
I love that game. I love that game.
Oh, I love that game too, and there's so much art in that, and there's so much, like, horror theme things that are in there, but if you look at it and you really dissect it, it's gorgeous, and there's so much content in so many frames of that game that it's beautiful to look at. Even out of context of being a video game, it's just beautiful to look at.
Yeah, I think that game did Resident Evil better than Resident Evil, but that's an unpopular opinion right there.
It definitely did it did enough right in the first two. I'm checking my way through the third one, and I know it's so old now, but it's still fun to go back and visit those games when I have time, and time is something we have right now.
Yeah, of course. I finally was able to play Zelda Breath of the Wild during quarantine, and it's anybody who I work with in the industry listening to this. The reason why I've been delayed on reviews, that's why.
Zelda Breath of the Wild. I don't blame you, buddy.
Exactly. Now, another thing I was really curious about is because it seems like you take inspiration from multiple sources, and you, like, I'd imagine inspiration sometimes strikes at very inconvenient times as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. The worst time is if I'm at, we all have jobs. If I'm at my actual job, and I work at UPS, and I'm surrounded by boxes, no instruments in sight. So that's kind of the worst time for a guitar idea to happen.
How do you keep track of it when it strikes?
This is going to sound so weird, but it is what we do. My vocalist Phil and I, we do something called mouth riffs, and it's literally going into the Facebook Messenger app, hitting record on the audio button, and making the riff with your mouth as best as possible. and we send that to each other sometimes 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and we'll literally start it as, hey, mouth riff, and we'll try to translate a riff with our mouth.
You got to release those someday. Make a record of just mouth riffs.
Okay, we can talk about doing a mouth riff record.
An Arson Choir a cappella record.
Oh God, it is going to be the weirdest thing ever.
Just imagine people crowd killing to that. People's heads would melt.
I feel like that would revolutionize the hardcore scene. I feel like there'd be whole hardcore bands of mouth riffs.
Yeah. Well, I was saying that with everything happening right now, I've always said that this is the best time for creativity. How much you want to bet there's going to be a hardcore band like Earth Crisis, but rather than being straight edge and hardcore, they're going to enforce masks and social distancing?
Man, that is I think there's two parts to what you just said. Is yes, it is a great time for bands to be creative and release content. I do think there is a way to go about it. I do think there's a right way, and I have seen a few attempts at wrong ways. That being said, we're doing the best that we can to release as much content as possible. While we have time, we hope that people like it. But as far as a band enforcing masks, I wish there was, to be honest. I wish there was more hardcore. I feel like the hardcore community does respond to what bands say and how delivering a message. I wish there was a band that was out there saying, like, we're not just here to sell masks, you're here to wear the masks. Because there is a few bands that I've seen that are putting their logo on masks, and that's cool, but they're not really saying, like, you need to wear the mask.
So
it's hard, bro. It's hard because everybody wants shows to come back, but there's not enough people that are really making that known. I guess making it said, like, hey, if you want shows to come back, you need to wear your mask.
Yeah, definitely. And, like, if you were to walk into an Earth Crisis concert with Taco Bell, it'll have the same resort if you go into that show's concert without a mask on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's got to be some kind of consequence. If nobody's going to listen, like, it kind of is what it is. We can't have live music back until people listen to some kind of reason about wearing the mask. And even out here in Orange County, where you would think that there's a good amount of people that would listen, there's still a lot of people that just don't see the point or don't think it's going to hit close enough to them for it to be relevant.
Yeah.
And we can, I'm sure you've talked to Kristen. We both can confirm that there's been a good amount of friends and artists that we have that have been hit by it. And if they're not hit by it, then their ability to work has been hit by it. And that's tough on everybody.
Yeah, me and Kristen were talking that this year is like a real life version of Jumanji.
Oh God, I was gonna say that's actually a really good. It seems like it only gets, I hate saying that, but it seems like it only gets worse every day. Every day there's something new that pops up. I try to watch the news, but I can only tune out. I can only fill my brain up with so much negativity sometimes.
Yeah, that's why I think, like, we got to use these hardships as our armor rather than our anchor, and that's really, like, I mean, it really. I was actually surprised that you told me that "Revenge My Love" was written like a couple years ago, because, like, it just seemed like it was the way that you released it. It was like it is the soundtrack to 2020. I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And
I appreciate that. It's just his dealings with whatever goes on in his life. They're tough, and I have to, I can't ever try to imagine what it's like to go through what he goes through, with some of the stories that he talks about, goes through, with some of the stuff that I'm seeing every day on the news, what they go through. I don't know how I can ever relate to that. And I'm Hispanic, and it's not anywhere near the degree of what they go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think by creating art and creating music together, I feel like it informs people on a subject, it alerts people, but I think it also brings closure and release for you guys as well. You know, it's a healthy way of expressing the anxiety and the anger and the depression.
Mm-hmm. I would like to think so. I would like to think that the song kind of captures those elements too, as much as it is, you know, an angry song. But there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of desperation in the stuff that we write, and I hope that comes through. You know, I hope that you can hear that.
Yeah, definitely. And the final question I wanted to ask you is we touched upon it a little bit earlier, and I think we spoke about it at NAMM, but I was always fascinated with the Orange County, California scene, because I don't think people understand, like, obviously when people think of Californian rock or music, they'll think of, you know, the 80s, hair, glam, whatever, but, like, I feel like in your hardcore movement, I mean, think about how many, like, very famous bands sort of like came from that scene, like Avenged Sevenfold and Suicide Silence and Atreyu, 18 Visions, Bleeding Through, As I Lay Dying, like so many phenomenal bands from that region. I'd imagine that, like, with you guys, there has to be a great hardcore scene that the Arson Choir is affiliated with, right?
That is a complex question. I love each and every one of those bands for their own reason. You know, 18 Visions, Throwdown, Avenged Sevenfold, they all came from our area. You know, Chris works with Suicide. There is a somewhat of a thriving hardcore scene, but at the same time, maybe we'll find out after the lockdown and once shows can come back. Maybe we'll see how people respond to actually being able to go to shows again. The issue that I've seen with our local scene, with the Orange County scene, is there's too many things. There's too many shows. There's too many options. And when you have that many options, some bands get lost. You get lost in the clutter of, you know, too many bands. We've been lucky enough to you know, find enough bands that we work with, like Takers Leavers, Ursula, Steak Sauce Mustache. These are all, you know, close friends of ours that we've had to form a unit of shows, of bands that can, you know, fill a show's bill and get people to come out. There's some great Orange County bands like Pressure Cracks. They're coming up. That can fill a venue very easily. But there's so many options, and there's so many bands, and there's only so many venues right now that will hold hardcore shows that we kind of get lost. You kind of get lost in, like, you kind of get overwhelmed. If you really want, like, the best thing I can tell anybody that will listen to this or is in the heavy music scene, you know, support your bands, support local bands, support your friends. Because if you don't, support your venues, because if you don't, they're going to go away. And this lockdown has kind of showed, like, there's a lot of my friends that probably aren't going to be playing music after this because they can't keep it going, or they can't afford to, or you know, life has a way of happening regardless, and sometimes music kind of gets put on the tail end of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, but even still, like, you know, we said this is a good time for creativity. I feel like that while there is, you know, there's a lot of sheer terror, hardcore pun intended, and there's a lot of, you know, pain that's happening. I feel like that there's also maybe an essence of rebirth. I mean, kind of like a apples and oranges scenario, but My Chemical Romance started because the singer witnessed 9/11, and that's what made him want to start a band. So I do think that, you know, there's going to be I think there will be stuff that rises from the ashes of this despair that we are facing. Or maybe I'm just being a little overly optimistic.
No. I think what you'll see is, well, what I would hope to see, because there is a lot of artists that are taking advantage of the time, but I feel like those artists were taking advantage of their time already. Like, there's a really good YouTube creator that talks about emo rappers, and luckily they don't have a whole band that they have to support. They just, you know, they're able to do themselves and support that way. So I feel like a lot of bands will hopefully take that cue and go, I don't need to you know, do shows every weekend or tour constantly. I can make content we can make content on our own and put it out that way, and still, hopefully get a fan base that understands and connects and supports. I think I hope there will be a good amount of bands that come out of this lockdown better and bigger and with more attention.
Definitely.
That'd be nice to see.
It will happen. I'm not losing hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time. As always, great to talk to you, Marc. Just is there just anything you would like to promote? Obviously, thanks to the virus that I'm not naming on my outlet because I don't want to give it any publicity. But first off, when shows do happen again, is there a chance Arson Choir will come to the East Coast one day? We would love to have you here.
We're doing everything that we can to make that happen. The best thing that anybody can do and anybody listening can do to make that happen is purchase the record, purchase some merch. The easier that it is for us to be able to collect the funds to be able to get over there, the faster it can happen when shows happen. Really, that's all it comes down to is we'll get there, if we have to crawl there. But we'll get out there as long as there's a demand for us to be out there,
Awesome. I'll book you myself if I have to.
We played the one person before, and it's totally fun too. We put on the same show if it's one person, 10 person, or 100 people.
Awesome. But Marc, anything else you'd like to promote?
Thank you so. Yeah, no. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for giving me the time to do this interview with you. I truly appreciate it. Anytime we get some kind of interest, it really it makes me happy because it makes me feel like I'm doing something good and I'm doing something right. Because I do this band to just not be. I do this band to keep my sanity. So if somebody connects with it, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for the art and the music.
Thank you, buddy. Outside of that, Invisible Monsters out October 2nd. We've got 2 videos out, one for Vanisher, one for Revenge My Love, and we got a lot more stuff coming.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marc. Everybody, we are here with Marc of the Arson Choir. Be sure to pick up Invisible Monsters October 2nd. Check out the new singles Revenge My Love and Vanisher. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time. Stay safe, everybody.